Today is a very interesting morning. I'm sure you've all woken up to the amazing news that you probably didn't expect coming. I can see you laughing. So I think if we have a session today without discussing that, I will be absolutely amazed. And I know our great panel have some opinions on that. But just to introduce the session today, we're talking today about bots, automation, and messaging, and its application in tourism. And we would like to hear from a great panel about what they think the future is for this technology and these developments. But also we want to hear from you about where you see it fitting in with your destinations and your businesses. So we're going to have a really lively discussion this morning. We have a fantastic panel joining us who have lots of opinions on this topic. Unfortunately, we do have one apology. Terry Scriven from Google wasn't able to make it this morning. She is, in fact, American, but that's not the reason she wasn't able to be here. So she does send her apologies. But I would like to welcome our very distinguished panel to the stage. So please give a very warm welcome to John Newbold, Alex Bainbridge, and Sandro Kuzulin. Please join the stage. Now, of course, we've heard a lot about this topic in the last year or so. And we've seen a lot of prototype applications being developed and being put out there. So our panel today are going to share their thoughts on where this technology is going. Now, if you have the World Travel Market app, you can, in fact, ask questions to the panel by simply using the Slido feature and putting your questions forwards. So we will be inviting you to ask questions, and we have a very opinionated panel, so they will certainly be sharing their opinions and trying to answer those with you. But I think first, just to warm things up, and also wake some of you up if you had really dreary mornings after reading that news, I'd like everybody just to stand up for a minute. Yep, everybody get up. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Right, stretch. No, we're not going to do a mass exercise task. Yeah, you guys as well. That's good. Right. Now, I want you to stay standing. Stay standing if you've used some sort of bot or messaging service as a consumer. Very good. Okay, we weren't sure if everybody would sit down right then. Okay, stay standing if you've now discussed how this can be relevant for your business or your destination. Wow, so pretty much everybody is thinking about that. That's very revealing. Now, stay standing if you've actively discussed its potential and you're planning to see how you can actually use it within your organization. So, wow, impressive. There's still quite a few left. And now, stay standing if you've actually developed some sort of application in this direction. One person. I'm looking for your opinion later on. Thank you very much. Okay, great. So that's a little bit of market research there for you. Some actually quite surprising insights. I think one of the first things that we thought as a panel was that most people would think they hadn't encountered this at all. So I think there is a growing recognition that this technology and the developments here have creeped into our lives in one way or another. So I'd like to invite our first speaker to come and join and introduce his thoughts. And 383 is a creative agency that have done a lot of thinking in this direction. They've done a lot of thinking around how Skyscanner might be able to use this. And he's going to share some of his thinking about this and really set the tone for the session. So please welcome John to the stage.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Great, good morning. So I get the pleasure of opening this morning. And I'm assuming that if most of you are here already, you're probably coming to try and answer this question this morning. I've called my kind of opening talk bot or not, because I think that's probably the question on everyone's lips. And I think really, for me this morning, what would be probably most useful for you guys in the audience to get is the question that we've been trying to answer at 383 over the last few months, which is how do we cut through the hype? How do we cut through the kind of rhetoric about what bots might be and what it might mean? And how do we start to get to specifics about where and when they should be used? Just a little bit of background on me. I'm Strategy Director at 383. We're a digital experience studio. What does that mean? Basically, in a nutshell, it means that we use emerging technologies and design to create new customer experiences for some of the world's largest organizations. So you might not have heard of us, but you probably have interfaced with some of the things that we've built. So we do a lot of digital product design and development for Hilton Worldwide. We run a lot of their Wi-Fi platform. We're doing some in-room TV experimentation for them at the moment. We also do a lot of thought leadership within the travel sector. So if you go to our site, 383project.com, the 10-minute guide that you can see there in the top right is one that we published a few months ago with Skyscanner, and it talks all about how Skyscanner went about developing their speech bot that they've launched with Amazon Alexa and Amazon Echo. So that might be something to download and grab afterwards if you're interested. We also run a conference every year in October called Canvas, where we've had speakers from places like Airbnb and Skyscanner before, so that's worth checking out. So I thought what would be a good opener this morning to set the scene is to kind of show you something that you're probably all quite familiar with, which is the travel journey as defined by Google a few years ago now. So Google kind of set out that these were the main steps that customers go through on their travel journey, from dreaming all the way through to sharing. I think what's important to understand is that any digital interaction that a customer is having at any stage of that travel journey to date has happened through two kind of main ways, through two paradigms for exploring this customer journey. Customers either interact through search and the web, dominated obviously by our friends Google, or through mobile applications. So they interact with the customer journey through mobile applications, again, dominated by platforms like Android and iOS. And one of the reasons I think that bots have come to the fore recently isn't necessarily because bots in and of themselves are a new technology. It's because bots potentially create a new place, a third place, away from the web and away from applications, where brands are going to be able to transact with customers on this customer journey. And it's no surprise then that the big organizations, the big technology players that you see who are making the initial big pushes to provide bot platforms are people like Facebook and Amazon, who don't have the foothold in those two territories of search and the web, or with mobile applications. Benedict Evans, if you've heard of him, does a great podcast. There's a particular edition of that podcast called A Third Runtime for the Web, where he talks about the kind of catalyst behind these platforms and why these big technology players are making a push at the moment to try and get brands to come and build on their lawns. So I think that's helpful to have in the back of your minds when you're thinking about these emerging platforms and which ones potentially to look at and which ones to use. And there's one thing I can tell you that's absolutely certain this morning, and that is that when you are designing on emerging platforms, the same thing is true that has been true for any other platform across all time, whether it was web or mobile, that the best bots are going to be built on very strong, specific use cases with a very good user experience. Now, that might sound like quite an obvious thing, but actually it's very important to remember, because actually what you see quite often when there's a big kind of gold rush like we saw with mobile applications is that often the PR and marketing teams can get hold of the innovation, and the innovation becomes a lot more about a PR headline than it does about making something for the customer that's really, really useful. So I think that idea of utility, of making something which kind of improves the experience for the customer, is really, really important to remember when you're thinking about this whole world of bots and the different emerging platforms that we see. I want to share 5 quick slides, 5 thoughts from me on bot design from the experimentation that we've been doing with customers in our lab at 383, just to kind of get the conversation started and share some opinions on what good design looks like. The first thing I want to share is that chat isn't the right interface for everything. So what I mean by that is that a lot of the bots that you'll see at the moment are driven by something called conversational UI, conversational user interface. And this is essentially where the bot interaction happens entirely in a text message type format. So the user is typing away to the bot. Some of the best bots I've seen actually don't rely on this conversational UI, and they bring elements of mobile application design into the Messenger platform. So there's a really good study done on a company in the States that released a pizza delivery bot, and what they found was that to order a pizza through the bot took 67 key presses versus 4 clicks on the website and online. So one of the things that I want you to be thinking about when you're designing bots is how can you still create quite rich interfaces that, yes, involve conversation, but also bring in elements of image selection, of dialog boxes, to try and narrow down the choices for people more quickly. The second thing that I personally think is really interesting is that this whole area of bots is going to become a lot smarter when the AIs mature and are enabled to speak to one another. I think actually some of the most interesting interactions that we will have with bots are when the bots can speak to one another and give us one blended, useful piece of information. So let's imagine a scenario, for example, where I book a meeting in Leeds next week and my diary bot has permission to go away and speak to Trainline bot, and it tells that bot that I need to get to Leeds by a certain time. Those two guys then get together and create a blended message through to my concierge bot, which has permission to speak to me, and I get one blended message from lots of different atomized services. And this is the type of thing that we're seeing our friends at Google start to do in things like Google Now, and actually separating this idea of being the final point of interfacing with the customer from being a part of the ecosystem of bots that could provide information to the customer is quite an important distinction to make in your minds. The third thing I want to point out is that bots might be better shortcuts than they are endpoints. So what I mean by that, again, if you think about the travel journey, a lot of the kind of rhetoric at the moment is talking about replacing people completely. So an entire end-to-end journey interaction might be facilitated through a bot, where as a human you only deal with the software at the other end. Actually, where I think we're probably seeing in the short term the highest utility from bots is where bots are being used to kind of narrow the purchase funnel down and then hand off someone who's quite well qualified to a human to kind of finish the conversation. So quite a lot of the bots that are out there at the moment that offer kind of travel concierge style services still rely on a team of humans at some point to come and provide some level of insight, because it's quite hard for the AI in its entirety at the moment to fulfill a very niche and specific conversation that the customer wants to have about their travel journey. Fourth, and this is an interesting one when you look at what's already happening in Asia with WeChat, is that bots, I think, are going to be most effective when the platform itself that you're interacting on knows a lot about us, has a lot of stuff about our identity, and is authorized to make payments and transact on our behalf. This is kind of like the holy grail utopia for the platforms that Amazon and Facebook are trying to build, where we as the customer trust the platform enough to surrender checking out as well as just querying information. And the reason that these platforms are so interested in us being able to have these type of interactions through bots is because, again, I mentioned WeChat. Something that you see within the messenger interface in WeChat is some very interesting things that people are starting to do entirely within the messaging platform away from the web. So this isn't strictly a bot, but it's a really good example of the type of interaction I'm talking about. So this shows someone's journey within the WeChat interface to select a doctor's appointment, to triage their ailment, to find the right department, to pick a consultant with a time slot, and then to book and schedule that appointment using their credit card. And WeChat's only able to do that because they know a lot about the user and the data is surrendered, and also because they have permission to transact and check out on their behalf. Again, at the moment, what you're seeing on some of the emerging bots on the newer platforms is that you can get part way down the purchase funnel, but then the bot hands you off to the web or hands you off to a mobile application to finish your checkout. And I think actually bots are going to be far more useful when they don't need to do that anymore. Lastly, the fifth point that I want to make is one that I don't think any of us can solve, but one certainly that the big platform providers need to focus on solving, is that at the moment we have a bit of a discovery problem around bots. So yes, there are lots of new bots emerging, but it's quite hard to get traction with customers and for customers to actually find where those bots are or to know which bots to use. And what I don't want, the future I don't want, thinking about being the custodian of the customer, is a future where lots of brands create lots of bots, and then the channel to try and get to the customer is to say, hey, why don't you make friends with our bot on Facebook, and that we see lots of above-the-line advertising or other messaging carrying calls to action to go and find our bot within a certain space. We saw that with the web in 2000. We saw it in 2007 to 2010 with the explosion of social. Everyone thought they needed a social account. Everyone would create a Twitter account and then realize that customers weren't flocking to it and then want to put their Twitter handle on all of their billboards. And I don't think a future that's particularly useful from the customer's perspective is one where there's such high friction around discovering these bots. So certainly for people like for Google, for Amazon, for Facebook, one of the challenges is going to be knowing which bot is most useful for the customer and knowing when to suggest that. And that challenge becomes even more complex when you imagine that really those providers that are going to be suggesting the bots to us as consumers are businesses in and of themselves. They're not impartial. They need to make money. There are revenue streams behind the bots. So discovery becomes a very interesting area. So I hope that's helped set the scene a little bit for some of the topics that we might be talking about this morning. If you've got a question that doesn't get answered, I'm John383 on Twitter, so you can grab me there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. I think really good thoughts to get us started there. So next to the stage is Sandra Kozulin. Now, you're head of strategic partnerships very recently at Travel Audience. You're coming from Amadeus, and of course, Travel Audience is part of Amadeus. Yeah. And recently involved in Evature, investing in that as a company, which is a very interesting company, which I'm sure you're going to share more about. So the stage is yours, and tell us a bit more about what you're doing in this space.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Before starting, I want to ask you one thing. How many of you did a phone call in the last 15 minutes? 15 minutes? Okay. How many of you did a chat in the last 15 minutes? Don't be shy, I saw you. So very good, there you go. I brought up this slide, no? It was in the early time of phone. No one really understood what text messaging was about, and now you don't understand why you need a phone to call people, no? Everything is changing very rapidly. A survey shows that 41% of millennials don't want to be bothered to talk to anyone. They just want to text, okay? No human contact, just text. Before, Nick was asking you, how relevant you see in disruption with bots, with chats. And here we run a survey. Actually, we just published a paper, Amadeus and London School of Economics. If you Google it, you find it in the top results. And we did some surveys. One of them is showing that the majority of travel suppliers sees that the bots are the second biggest factor in disruption in travel, okay? Travel suppliers. But the airlines think is the biggest opportunity for them. Okay, so it's there, it's here already. A little parenthesis, because we are, most of the time, when we sit in Europe, in the US, we are really Western European, US centered, but in Asia, they did a job already a few years ago. We have Line and WeChat that integrated all these things over the year, payment, gaming, a lot of things. No? So when you think about why Facebook bought WhatsApp for 19 billion, it made a lot of sense. Because if you see how much money these guys are making, WeChat is making $7 per user per year. For $7, a billion users, 7 billion. Good. In a few years, you catch up with the 19 billion that you spent. So the business is there. WhatsApp still is 6 cents, but let's see. It's about time. So what does it mean in travel? Now, because here we are in a travel conference. We all work in the travel industry. So in travel, the intuitive cases, here this is a slide from Focusrite, is that we provide to users the possibility to search, to book, servicing, in-trip, in-destination, so a lot of different services. So let's see how the guys are already doing it already. So this is an example of China Southern Airline. Back in 2014, so already like 2 years ago, 13 actually, 3 years ago, they were doing the inspiration, the search, the book, the check-in. And here you read that 700,000 flights check-in since its launch. So it's something, it's up and running. It's not like innovation. It's 2013, yeah? 3 years ago. Link Hotel and Casino, okay? You get there with your WeChat. You get a QR, you open your door, all the automation, the domotics is already up and running. So it's there. This is something that we do with Evature, that is an Israeli startup we invested in. What do? They do natural language processing, voice, text. They have artificial intelligence, and they help people to find information to book content, to understand and to get service. And as we were mentioning before, it's a mix between artificial intelligence and people, because it works like this. There is first the machines support people. No? When the machines lose the confidence factor, they feel that they are getting off track. The message is routed to a physical person. The physical person takes over and responds to the consumers, and at the same time, it teaches to the machine how to solve the problem. Okay? And it's seamless, so the consumer doesn't even notice that there is a human after a while. Yeah, okay, this is the logo of Evature. The one thing that we do in Amadeus is to build a community model. So we don't focus on a single silo, but we interface to everything. No? The world is complex today. There are just 8 channels, but there can be other 10 channels. Okay? So what do we do for destinations, for airlines, for hotels? We create an interface that seamlessly communicates to all these channels. Here I have my last slide, killer slide. So that's why I say that is the last one. But okay, bottom line. Here you have the users on one side. Then there are a lot of content. It's glued. The content goes to Evature that does the AI and then interface to all the channels. Here, one thing that we are doing with Amadeus is that we have a base of B2B, of agents, online and offline, of hundreds of thousands. So we train the machine with the responses of these agents. So in this way, you have a unique source of data, so the machines learn faster and can serve the consumers faster. And that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So, really interesting things you just shared there, and it's interesting to see that Amadeus is, looking at these sort of companies and interested to see how that can apply to that huge ecosystem that you have. So I'm going to go straight to Alex. Now, Alex, you're stepping in for Terry. Not quite as pretty as Terry. And you're the new Google on the stage. But what I have to say
we all work for Google anyway, because every travel company produces content that Google then takes and puts their own advertising on. So everyone works for Google anyway. So we'll just keep working on that.
We all work for Google. So thank you for standing in, first of all, at the last minute. Now, Alex is an entrepreneur. He's a CEO of Tour CMS. And you've worked both in technology and also with those tour providers. So you know what it means to provide a service and where this sort of technology can come in. So share with us your thoughts and reactions to what you've just heard so far.
To me, this is a little bit like the early web. The advantage of the early web in the mid-1990s was you could go away for a few weekends and start tinkering, start experimenting, start playing, and just learn and see what works and what doesn't work. And then what happened with mobile apps, when they first came in order to get the basic mobile app working, you needed to invest $250,000 before you even had an app, which meant that the only experimentation that took place with corporate money in and projects that either worked or didn't work. And I feel we're like back there all again with bots, in that the experimentation is actually happening by the brands rather than the sort of people who can just go and do something in a couple of weekends. So I'd really look forward to the time, hopefully in the next couple of years, where we can get beyond the initial brands who are doing it as an experiment, but back into the let some innovators at the technology without some of the high startup costs, and just see what comes out of it, because this is undoubtedly the future. The question is whether or not we understand how it's going to fit into the journey quite yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions being asked. So I guess the first question that I'll put to all three of you is thinking about travel and that travel cycle that we discussed so much. What would you say are the most obvious use cases that exist today where this can be solved with the sort of things you've been sharing?
I guess for me, probably some of the use cases I touched on in my talk. So I think probably the two parts to this answer. So the first thing I'd say is that a lot of the use cases that you can service at the moment are the ones where you have a lot of typical repeat questions, where the machine has already learned a lot and you have data to answer those questions, and you can try and get someone down the funnel quite quickly. As I mentioned, I think that kind of the skill is then for the bot to know when to hand off to a human, because what you find is that as conversation gets more nuanced, the interaction with the bot, the utility of the bot kind of lessens a little bit. I also think where the big opportunity is, and you're starting to see this fulfilled in some bots that have better AI, is when the AI is very good at understanding intent, and it can understand quite detailed, blended, I guess, kind of paragraphs of speech or text. So if I, for example, said I want to fly to New York with my wife and 2 kids, and one of them's under 1, so might not need a seat, and I need to get there on the 10th of November and get back by the 16th, that's a lot of web clicks. It's a lot. I have to interface with a form, kind of really high friction on the web to put that into a browser. If an AI can understand the intent behind what I want to do and narrow down that query quicker, I think at the moment that's where the opportunity is in kind of reducing those frictions that we see around web and apps.
Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think there's two main uses, at least in local tours, for bots. The first is that we have drastically shrunk the time between booking and boarding. Historically, people either booked when they booked their flight and their hotel, which was a couple of weeks before, so imagine you're booking a local tour in destination, or they walked into a visitor centre, which is a human-to-human interaction. But now people are on their mobile phones at 11 p.m. and are being picked up from their hotel at 6 a.m. the next morning. There is no office time now to do that post-booking customer support. So by putting a bot in there, we can still interact with the customers in that very short time frame. And the second main area where I think bots will come in is in the multi-day local tours. So you book a 7-day tour to Morocco, for example. We run the technology for a lot of multi-day tour operators, and 100% of multi-day transactions have some form of customer to sales agent interaction as part of that booking process. So if we could just narrow that down a little bit, so even if it was just taking 50% of that time off that member of staff, it means that with the same number of expert sales consultants you have who understand a destination and understand your product, you could probably sell twice as many bookings. So I think that's where there's a big opportunity in day tours and in multi-day tours for applying bot technology. And I can say that no one has solved either of those two problems yet. So looking forward to seeing how people do that over the coming years.
Yeah, so really looking at real solutions to problems which have been existent for a long time.
Absolutely, I agree. Search, book, servicing, pre-trip, and in-trip. These are the places where the bots will add a lot of value.
Yeah. So I'll come back to you because I'm interested as a media company to hear your thoughts on where sort of raising awareness about opportunities and brands and experiences might come into that. I'll come back to you on that in a second. We have a couple of questions from the audience. Don't forget, you can ask questions using the app. You just need to head to Slido, and then you can post a question to our panel. So they're waiting for your questions. We have a couple of questions already. So we have the first question that came through is, how can I evaluate the precision and accuracy of a bot? Right. So I don't know if they're thinking as a consumer or as a business, but what are your thoughts on that?
I'd probably say as a business, get permission from the board to fail and experiment. I think a lot of the innovation challenges that are faced by large organisations aren't technology ones, they're cultural ones. And actually, it goes back to your point around the emerging web. One of the reasons that was so great was because it wasn't locked down and people had permission to fail, and there was a kind of a culture of innovation. And actually what we've had, I think that's come from apps is we've seen the narrowing of apps in a very small set of very successful apps, and then lots of 3-second apps is people are quite afraid of investing in emerging technologies in case they fail. And to evaluate the precision of a chatbot, you have to have permission to be able to experiment with customers and to be going into it eyes wide open that might not work, and you have to be able to iterate and learn from it.
I mean, I would always say that looking at customer support, the best way to improve your customer support is to put your CEO on customer support for half a day, because they'll soon find out what needs to be fixed. So in order to work on a bot, one way of potentially looking at it would be to put a human actually pretending to be a bot, because then you'll soon find out what kind of questions people ask and how you should interact with it. And then if you can work out how you can replicate that using the bot, then you're kind of working working towards it. I wouldn't just let your bot handle all your customers from day one. You know, put them in 50-50, so 50% get a human and 50% get a bot, and just test and see what the outcome is. If one set think it's great and one set think it's rubbish, then you'll understand where you should be focusing your attention.
Yeah, and of course Amadeus is a human network actually of users that manage Amadeus. So that's quite an interesting thought.
Actually, our experience on field, we receive thousands of user requests per day. We'll evaluate the accuracy because we see the user response. If a user makes a question and the response is not accurate, the user will try to make the question again, or will change the subject, will start again, and the bot will realize immediately that is off track, and then will divert the conversation to a human. So this is very, very intuitive to see the accuracy. You see how many times the users have a reaction that you don't expect.
So machine learning is really key in this whole process, in actually training and developing the right kind of responses, which ultimately become more and more accurate the more that's been tested and tried. We have a question from the audience about tools and what tools we should think about to build your own bot. So I guess, like everything, there's a million ways that you can do things, and there's a cheap, fast-to-market way, and then there's the long-term development way. But what are your thoughts, maybe from both a big business perspective and also small businesses that are thinking about this?
I mean, I guess I can probably answer from what we see in large organisation point of view. And actually, the tools and platform, the tools that the platforms are putting out are very easy to grapple with, well documented. They're easy to start using. I think the challenge probably that big businesses have is their own tooling, and that actually their legacy technology stacks aren't always ready to surface the information that a bot would need. If you think about a modern company like Netflix, the way they have architected their technology stack is service orientated. So what that means is they have a specific middleware layer where different inputs and outputs can access all of the data, and the business is built from the ground up to anticipate new platforms coming where Netflix needs to surface their content in the future. That isn't how traditional large hospitality companies have grown. Most stuff is ring-fenced, it's not API driven, and it's quite hard for a bot to get at the data that it needs to become intelligent. So, I would say probably the tools that are out there that are great, it's being able to point those tools at a technology stack which works with the tools that I think is probably the biggest challenge that large organizations face.
Okay, we got another question. Do we have any questions from the audience? Anybody want to post a question directly? Yep, the gentleman just over there. Do we have a microphone?
Thank you. Yes, I was wondering if you think the future should be also to have bots on client side, for example, your smartphone, an intelligent assistant, I would say like almost a Jarvis from Iron Man, and he would actually book the flight for you. So it's not the bot on the brand side that would help. It's your own bot that knows you, that knows your credit card number, that would actually book the flight for you, and it comes from your smartphone. And do you think that's here is the future, rather than trying to understand a client from outside?
I'll take that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm actually more excited. I mean, that was a question, I'm not sure everyone heard that. There was a question about flights and doing flight bookings via bots. I'm more excited by the opportunities for in-destination use of bots, because the flight and the hotel is just a commodity product effectively. And so, you're going to be taking seconds off, or maybe it's convenient, maybe that's enough to be convenient, but maybe it's not. But in destination is where you can really improve someone's memory of the trip. So if there's 7 days in your destination, have they gone to the right restaurants? Have they gone to the right attractions? Did they go at the right time of day? They don't have an expert that they can call on. They've got guidebooks and there are some apps, but they don't have an expert they can call on. So I'm more excited about bots in destination rather than trying to take 10 seconds off a flight transaction. And how people travel around destination is very personal. So you were coming to say, well, would you have a personal bot? Yeah, and that would really learn whether or not you're going to prefer one kind of food to another, for example.
Yeah, I think the another aspect of the question was around whether or not we'll essentially have like one personal bot that then interfaces with lots of other services for us. And I think that that will definitely be the case, because I think you can see that already happening if you look at another adjacent industry in connected home. So what we've seen in connected home is explosion of the Internet of Things, and all the providers are focused on very specific use cases initially. So, you know, a connected light bulb, a connected doorbell. None of those things can interface with each other at the moment. And so what you're seeing at a platform level is Apple trying to then bring something like HomeKit. So you have one point of interface, and HomeKit becomes your single point of confidence, and HomeKit can then speak to and make all of those devices interact with one another. I think that's the future.
It's a future. I hope it's not the future. That sounds rather too much tech, and I'm a techie. I think the travel is part of travel, unless you're on a business trip or, you know, some other kind of group travel. Part of travel is exploring the unknown, and I think if we over-plan, if we have all these assistants saying, oh, you must go and do this now, you must go and do that now, you're never going to find something undiscovered that you discovered for yourself. And I think that's half of the joy of travel, is that you find things that you weren't expecting to find.
Yeah.
So let's leave in some opportunity to create something that's interesting, you know, rather than just putting everyone into kind of a project plan of their trip.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that there's a danger that we lose the serendipity of travel by trying to automate too much. But I do think that, when I said the future that no one wants is where you interact with 100 services all at once, because that isn't particularly useful. So I think we're going to see some element of funneling up to one bot.
The way I describe it is, it's like having a toddler. You don't want your toddler to fall over and hurt themselves, but they do actually have to fall over and hurt themselves to learn not to fall over. So you do have to have people, when they're travelling around a destination, they have to learn what is good and what's not good for themselves before they have something to assist them to do that. Because then they can make a judgment as to whether or not the bot is actually helping them or not.
Can I take a position in between? Because
Absolutely, yeah. Go ahead, Sandra.
I think most of the people spend more time planning a trip than enjoying a trip. Yeah. So bots will help to shrink this time and to spend more time on valuable things. I mean, we waste a lot of time searching and booking flights still.
I would agree with you if they do what they're supposed to do and they don't become an absolute distraction to the trip. Yeah. But we have a couple of questions. We have somebody's asked, which I think you've already answered really, is do you think it's going to replace human support? And I guess the answer is partially. Yeah. Partially.
I think it depends on the scenario. I think if the customer support is repetitive and can be learned, you know, there's lots of similar frictions, then yes. I think if the customer support is there because it's nuanced and intelligent and human, then no.
We also need to distinguish between customer support and sales support. So if it's pre-booking, then that's a different kind of a question to post-booking. Hey, my card didn't work. Actually, where do I go to do this? Or I don't know. That's
different complexity.
Different complexity, different types of things. I mean, one of the great things about travel is having people who, and I'll say it, who don't speak English, because the assumption across all of tech is that everyone speaks English, and that's not the case. And this is where, you know, you don't need a bot to do this. You just need to be able to provide a service in a non-English language, and if bots can help that, great.
And we have a really, really good question, which I think is a good last question to discuss. Unless we have someone in the audience who has a burning question they want to put forwards now, don't feel shy. So somebody has asked, is it a good strategy to develop bots or other bots on other messaging platforms like Messenger, Telegram, and Slack? And I think this is a big question, because who is actually going to own this space? Who's going to provide the infrastructure? As you mentioned in your talk, isn't it about bots connecting with other bots and having a much more intelligent sort of bot conversation? So where do you see that going?
Well, the VCs are putting a lot of money into this sector. So at the moment, I would use any platform that's spending money, because they are for VC money, because that's where all the research is happening. So you'll do all your learning. That doesn't necessarily mean that the outcome of that project should then be scaled up across your big brand. So if you're a brand, you could use one of those platforms to do a test, and then maybe go off and build your own thing in your own brand later. But you have to you have to have all those conversations internally, because all of a sudden you're finding that people. It's like your organization structure is based around how things currently work. You start changing that radically, you need to have conversations. So make sure that you do that without too much tech investment. So use somebody else's platform first. Once you've mastered that, perhaps look at building your own, or at least rebranding somebody else's.
John, who do you think the winners in this space will be from the tech side?
I think that there are going to be elements. I think all of the major players that are there now will be the major players in the future. I don't think what's going to happen is a big war of attrition where we're going to see one or two of the, Facebook or Amazon necessarily succeed over Google or Apple. I think that answering the question around is it a good strategy, I'd say yes, absolutely. I think getting your technology ready to exist on lots of different platforms, even ones we don't know about yet, is a really good strategy. I also think it's really good in the short term because it's where the customers are. There's lots of investment, as you pointed out, and actually those newer channels are quite cheap channels to potentially go and engage with. We know the guys at Skyscanner really well, and a lot of their strategy has just been trialing lots of different platforms and finding specific use cases that are unique to those platforms. So they've done a group messaging bot specifically for Skype because that's what they figured a lot of people were trying to achieve with Skype was plan holidays together in remote locations. And so I think it's about understanding the platform and what's happening there. Slack maybe more for business, and trying to find a bot that fits the specific platform.
So the same rules that applied to the mobile space are now applying to the messaging space. It's choosing the right platform for the audience, making sure the use case is really clear and it's going to actually improve and provide a service.
I think initially, as a short-term strategy, companies will connect to the platforms that are more relevant for their geographic region, customer base. No? But as a mid-term, long-term strategy, this doesn't work. You need to work with a partner that connects to all the platforms because there is not a clear winner in the next 5 years of what is the platform. So you cannot connect to a single one. You need to have a layer, an intermediate that can route this with you and can put the intelligence across platforms. And this is...
We as technologists love building the next new tech, but fundamentally this as an idea won't take off until we've got free Wi-Fi everywhere in all destinations, because this is going to require connectivity. So although we as technologists are saying, hey, this is great, this is lovely, we all want to spend time doing this, we have to deliver the basics, which is let's get people to have internet access when they're traveling, and then we can start building services first. So let's make sure we get that kind of thing covered off.
Last thought, you mentioned getting the CEOs to be at the front of those messaging interfaces, see what the questions are. I think that's a really good point. And one of the challenges for a lot of businesses is creating a culture to test, learn, fail, and try again. So would you agree that transformation is one of the biggest things that needs to happen within businesses to actually adopt that culture which allows businesses to move in this direction?
I'm the worst person to ask about transformation because that's why I like doing startups, because you don't have to transform anything. You start with a clean sheet of paper.
Great. Last thoughts?
I think it's really important. I think it's very, very hard, and I think it's evidenced by the fact that the only things that we can point at as good examples at the moment are grown-up technology startups.
Great. Sandro, last word is yours on this.
That's why we invest in startups, because it's more tangible, the transformation is more tangible, the energy and the growth and the learnings from them and from us.
Great, excellent. Brilliant thoughts shared on this. Really interesting space. I think we're going to see a lot develop in this area. Thank you to all three of you for joining. Let's give them a round of applause. And I'm going to stay on stage with Alex because our next session is on virtual reality. These two gentlemen have to rush. I hope you don't miss your plane, Sandro. So thank you very much for that. Right, Alex, join me on stage. We're now going to move over to our next session. So I hope a lot of you will be interested in that. We're talking about virtual reality. And of course, this is a space that's really, really getting very, very interesting. I'm just going to quickly skip to the next part.